Chicago over the weekend, and the Chicago PD saying that 7 people were killed, 48 wounded since Friday night. And the youngest victim here, a young boy named Amari Brown.
My baby was 7 years old. 7. He had plans. He wanted to be somebody.
His father, pictured right here with Amari, was someone who died with him, or was with him when he died. Excuse me. The two were walking home from a 4th of July party. The father said he first mistook the gunfire as fireworks. Now, the police superintendent says the bullets were meant for Amari's father, who was out of jail on bail. In another incident, a 17-year-old boy was shot and killed while he played basketball at the Hydea Pendleton Park. The park is named after the 15-year-old girl who was killed in 2013 when she was hanging out with her friends. Paxton Arnold is an entrepreneur and a Chicago native and joins me now about this spike in crime from over the weekend. And historically, Chicago sees this spike in shootings and murders in the summertime. But where do you really peg the root of this violence? Such a big spark of violence over the holiday weekend.
Right. Well, it's so interesting because this has been going on at least since I was young. I remember I wrote an article for the Chicago Tribune on a 7-year-old kid by the name of Dantrell Davis, who had been killed at the time at Cabrini Green's housing projects as he was walking to school with his mother. You know, obviously summertime, you have kids out. A lot of times you have community programs that have been cut, so a lot of these kids don't have anything to do or anywhere to go, and it also plays into the lack of guidance that these kids are not necessarily getting at home. So when you put all of this together and all the systemic issues from budget cuts in education and so forth, it creates this kind of perfect storm of what you see every summer in the city of Chicago.
Meanwhile, Aaron, it's such a weird dichotomy over the weekend because we just had a story on before about all the people that came out for the Grateful Dead, the farewell concert that was taking place there, and the tens of thousands of people that spent the weekend coming to celebrate this iconic American band. And then there's this sense of what's going on the other side of town with the violence, the murder, the mayhem.
Right, right. I mean, Chicago is, especially in the summertime, Chicago is probably, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful cities in the country. And like you said, the word dichotomy is perfect, but also Chicago is one of the most segregated cities in Chicago, especially when you talk about people of color, African Americans on the south and west sides of Chicago. Chicago has experienced a great gentrification under Mayor Daley's tenure while he was still in office. But again, some of the problems at the root, some of the systemic problems still have not necessarily been addressed. And again, that goes back to making sure our kids are educated, and not even just our kids, but some of our young parents. I always say everything starts at home, and if we can't save our young parents, then we can't save our kids. We could provide all the amazing programs in the world, but if it's not being reinforced when these children go home, what happened this weekend will continue to happen as it has over, at least like I said, the last 20 or 30 or so years.
It really is when we think about this. And just the other thing before we leave, the thought that I want to leave everybody on is the fact that this 17-year-old boy was shot and killed playing basketball in Hydea Pendleton Park. This was the park named after the 15-year-old girl who was shot and killed in 2013. Paxton Arnold, thanks for joining me, Aaron. I appreciate your time. Still ahead on today's show, I'm going to return to Baltimore. 2 months after the death of Freddie Gray, homicides in that city